Hello, and welcome to Be Indie Now, a podcast about independent game development. I'm your host, Tobiah Marks, and with me today is my friend Andrew Severns.
Hello.
And my friend Katie Welka via Skype.
Hi.
So, Andrew, what do you do for a living?
What I do for a living is I am a sponsorship and event coordinator currently, but I'm aspiring to be a producer in the game industry. And that was my college degree that I had to make from scratch because they didn't have it at the time.
Awesome.
So, with what I'm doing now, I look at it as experience in managing people and projects and events and, just try and take what I learned in school, in terms of doing game development and try to apply it directly to managing the projects.
Very cool. What about you, Katie? What do you do?
Well, I've been a producer and designer in the past, and I'm currently a project manager at ZAM Network. So I work on sites like Wowhead and lolking.net. And basically what a project manager is, if you're not familiar, I work as a Scrum Master. So I work with agile development and kind of help, I guess you could say I help the sites. We decide what features we're going to do, and then I facilitate actually implementing those features into the websites via project management.
Well, then here's a question right off the bat. Did you actually get the Scrum Master certificate? And if so, from where?
I haven't. I have looked into it, and it's something I may actually do this year.
Well, why don't you tell me and listeners what the Scrum Master certificate is?
Sure. It's a short training. I think it's only a few days, and you train as an official Scrum Master. They take you through the whole process officially. And at the end of it, you get a certificate that looks pretty good on a resume, where you can say that you've actually been officially certified, you've passed the class, there's a test you have to take, and you've passed the test.
And Scrum, for people who don't know, is a way to manage a structure of project, like, traditional waterfall method, right? Might be, you do all the pre-production first, and then you start, asset making, then you go down, the list. But then
Right.
Scrum is a more agile, different kind of way of doing that.
Yeah, it's basically like, creating user story, allowing the developers to actually have a say and input into, what's going on in terms of game creation. That's a pretty, basic different definition for what is Scrum, because for my, being out in talking to people and stuff and other producers, trying to gain knowledge on, so that way I can improve myself. It depends on the company culture, and I think Katie can speak more to that.
Yeah, I think one important thing to note about what Scrum and Agile are, and how they work together, and why people choose to use it. Why people choose to use it is a really important part of it. Is you can typically work on a 2-week cycle instead of on a year or a 3-year cycle. And every 2 weeks, you have something that you can demo at the end of those 2 weeks. So all the stakeholders are constantly being updated on what's going on, which is great on a website, which is probably already live. So you're adding new features constantly, and you're able to look and give feedback, and it's a much more involved approach that I see more and more companies using, especially indie nowadays.
Yeah, because the technology allows developers to have a 2-week cycle and make new products, put an update out for the games. I know most major apps update at least twice a month now in the app stores, because that's how you keep users. You have that continued engagement.
And that's, even when you're developing, it's like, it's like a chef who's cooking. If a chef does not taste his own food every once in a while, there's something wrong. They're just waiting for the final outcome. And that is, I would say that's one difference from like Waterfall, where, you do the concept, you do the pre-production, and it might be like a couple months later that you're like, okay, let's play it and see if it's fun. And by then, your company might have invested a couple $1 million into said project, into the game, and then find out it's not the best, but we've already invested a lot of money, so we're going to keep trudging.
Yeah.
Right.
So
that's your Blizzard and StarCraft goes.
Yeah. So with
Well, even Blizzard is now trying to work on more of a shorter cycles in terms of like WoW is now updating pretty often. So yeah. And Hearthstone was created with much smaller teams, as far as I'm aware. So.
And they just announced that new project. Oh, I forgot the name of it. Also a small fighting game.
Heroes of the Storm?
Yes.
Yeah.
Which I'm excited for because Blizzard makes it. I'm excited for everything Blizzard makes.
Yeah. No, it's like, that was the cool thing. It's like, Blizzard, they can take their time and they can develop their stuff, and who cares if it's 5 years? It'll be awesome. But nowadays it's like, why isn't it done in 2 years? There's all these other new processes and stuff you can do. And, it's like even with Steam and the Greenlight projects, like here's alpha, play our game. They like help us play our game, because obviously depending on the size of the team, especially, a small team, like you can't be there, playing your game 24/7. You're trying to develop at the same time.
Play test in public, just get it out
so
there.
play test in public, get it out there, and at the same time, having that little bit entrance fee helps in terms of production, in terms of having funding, so you can pay all the people that are working with you. I mean, even if it is a labor of love, it provides pizza and soda.
Yeah, just like selling your game is. I mean, there's the argument of getting free at first and building a fan base, but people are willing to pay. And if your game's not quite ready, there, you don't want to say, "Oh, we'll pay $2 to $5 for this game and it's not finished yet." But if you say, "Oh, this is alpha and you can get in early and you can help playtest and you can shape the game,"
yeah,
there's
Right.
people who are into that. If they know what that's going in, like they know what they're expecting to get going in, they're not going to rate it 1 star and say this game isn't finished yet. They'll say, "Oh, this is a cool idea." They'll send off some feedback. Maybe they'll forget about the game. Maybe they won't. But they'll have a much more positive experience.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah, and not to mention Kickstarter culture.
Yeah, Kickstarter culture, and at the same time, you are building your community. You are building the foundation on which your game will sit. And hopefully you're doing your due diligence. And doing what's right. Obviously you have your vision for the game and stuff, but at the same time, just like you can point to Scrum and having developers feel like, have a say in how a game is created. That goes for the community when you're having it out there in alpha and or beta.
Yeah. So going back to Scrum, like it seems to me it's kind of a thing that's for bigger teams. And when I say bigger teams, I'm thinking like over 15 people. And that's still a pretty small amount. But when we're talking about indies, most indies are under 15 people.
I'm curious where you got the impression it's for bigger studios. That's interesting.
Actually, I wanted to ask that. Like, what do you think, Katie?
I use it in very small teams. I've found that it works even better for smaller teams. The smaller you can break them down, the quicker you can get through sprint planning.
How small are we talking about? Like, what if it's a 3-person team? Is that too small?
Yeah. No. If you're structuring it traditionally, you've got your product owner who's kind of in charge of managing the backlog. The backlog, I'm going to try and break it down here. The backlog would be all the different features, basically, that you want to put into your site or your game. And the backlog would have just not everything that you think you're going to get done in the next 2 weeks, but just everything you can think of that you'd really like to get in the game, and then you prioritize those items. And the smaller the team is, the less argument you have over, what's getting prioritized. So it actually works really well with small teams.
I know.
I'm trying to think of what would be an argument for big teams, and it's not coming to me right off the top of my head.
I guess what I mean to say is that when you have a smaller team, you tend to cut certain roles, right? There's a lot of types of people it takes to develop a game, and we're talking about those bigger teams. People have their dedicated job is this specific role. They'll have somebody directed towards project management.
Yeah.
Right.
And the small team, when you're talking under 15 people, there might not be a project manager. There might be a lot of self-managing people. Is that a mistake? I mean, maybe we have 10 people. You probably should have some type of management going on. But I know a lot of 3-person teams that there was no kind of project management going on. I know in my companies, we were 3 people. We were just managing ourselves, really.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that you can say that's the makeup of the team. That's, who is actually in the team and how is it built, right? Is there a clear leader, or is it sort of a, committee? But ultimately, even in the smaller teams, usually there's one person that rises a little bit above that can help with direction.
Well, is project management a direction issue, or is it more of a scheduling thing? Is it made somebody who's, saying you do this and you do that, or I don't know. Like, is it?
If I could offer, let me give some insight into how it's traditionally structured based on my training. So typically you have a product owner that's in charge of organizing and prioritizing the backlog. That would be one person if you wanted to go the traditional route. So that person would be in charge of that and that only, and maybe some, content and design decisions. Then you would have the Scrum Master. That person is in charge of making sure that people meet when they're supposed to meet. They run the daily stand-ups where you meet every day and, just give a quick update. Here's what I did. Here's what I will be doing every day. And then you have developers, and the developers would be actually creating the product. So if we were going the traditional route, you'd only need 3 people in order to have a formal Scrum team, if you will.
How much time does incorporating Scrum into your project, or even other more formal methods of project management besides like an Excel spreadsheet? Like, does that take up too much time of a developer's? Like, is it going to have to devote an hour a day to doing this?
No, no, it's very low overhead depending on what you're using. If you're an indie developer, if you don't have access to the tools, I think there are some free programs out there.
I
I
know
can't
we
name
use
any off the
like
top of my
a
head.
Asana.
Asada, okay,
Yeah,
yeah, I've heard of
we
Asada before.
A lot of
That-
the version tracking softwares have some kind of light
Yeah.
project management bug tracking
We're-
issues that
Right.
you can use.
I think we were using Asana on one project, and then for another one, I think we used Pivotal for Agile. Yeah, I mean there are
Yeah.
a bunch of options out there and stuff, and I think not with Asana. There's another one we were using, and I'm forgetting the name. Darn it! But it was really cool because it was almost like, at least for what I learned in class and stuff for Scrum. It's like, here's the user stories, and they had like little Post-it notes and stuff like that. It's like, here's the user story. Or basically, here's the backlog, as
Right.
Katie said. Here's your backlog. Here's what's here's your priorities, and then the team or the individual and or team would pick said user story and be like, okay, we're going to use this for our sprint, and that sprint, the trip. Like Katie was saying, we're out 2 weeks, but they could be like, well, I should be able to get this done by the end of the day. I was like, okay, you're getting it done by the end of the day, hopefully. And by done, that means playable.
At least for whatever feature you're implementing.
Yeah, for whatever
right? I mean,
feature
Right.
you're
A lot of
implementing.
indie development,
mean-
you can go like playable feature, playable feature, playable feature.
I would actually recommend I would recommend against trying to just do it per feature and try and actually stick to a time schedule instead of a feature by feature basis. That way you're getting everybody on the same page and people get used to meeting at certain times.
How
Yeah.
do you break it down on a time basis, though? Like a lot of times I'll, go into a game, I'll make an Excel spreadsheet, I'll list all the features I want, and I have no idea how long that feature is going to take me to implement. And I'll start implementing one feature, and halfway through, I'll realize I'll need like some common core and start implementing another feature. And
Right.
eventually my checklist order breaks down. Like, am I doing
Right.
it all wrong? Like,
No, I think that's a key. It's probably the key. What would you call it? Friction point for something like this is. I think that's the most common complaint I'll hear from developers is, "Well, I've never done this before. How do I know how long it's going to take?" And it's not always perfect. And I think what's nice about Agile is it kind of, it's Agile. It kind of allows for a little bit of wiggle room. And the first time you plan your very first sprint, be it 2 weeks or 1 week or 3 weeks or however you end up doing it, you're probably not going to get everything done on time. You're probably going to think you can do more than you can actually do. Hiccups will happen. But what you want to do is, with every single feature that you decide to put into that sprint, assign it some sort of number value. We do t-shirt sizes, so you can do small, medium, large, right? And you say, okay, for 2 weeks, I think I can do this many smalls, mediums, and larges. Maybe do numbers, whatever you want to do that makes sense to you. And then at the end of that, evaluate how far you got. How many did you actually get done? And you can start adjusting as you go and get used to the flow of your team and understand, okay, as a group, we can normally get actually this many done. So it's kind of over time, you start to learn what you're capable of doing. And if you've got the right tools, you can even do like cool little burn down charts and stuff.
Yeah, and that was, my experience when we were doing a game. We had basically a 2-week deadline, and coming into it, it's like, and this helped with prioritizing. It's like, okay, what's bare bones? What just gets the game to play with the most basic features? And it's like, and then once we map that out, and then in talking to, my engineer and talking to Art, it's like, well, how long do you think this is going to take? So, just with the bare bones stuff, and then layer that on to, we basically just had a schedule, and then from there, layered on the next level. Okay, what can we do to make this better? And then ultimately, the last thing we did was like, okay, what's our stretch goal? Like, if we can get these things done, what are the last things that, it'd be really cool if we got to these, but ultimately we don't need them.
Yeah.
Do you
Prioritizing.
Yeah,
schedule?
basically prioritizing.
deal, yeah.
But when you're going into prioritizing, like, a double extra large is, can I actually get to a start screen?
So so those double extra large, like those important features, they might take multiple days. Small features might take a couple hours. How do you break that down? Do you break it down as what I need to get done per day, or do you say, oh, you get this done before lunch and then you'll get this done here? Like, what's the resolution of these
I would
kinds
say
of plans?
it depends on, knowing your own abilities and knowing the abilities of the team. especially, are you a new team just coming together? Are you an experienced team? Because like for my, like our first game in 2 weeks, yeah, it was cool, but we were learning, and in some things we gave ourselves more time, right, than we thought we needed, and some things we gave ourselves less time. We're like, oh crap, next time we know to give ourselves more time. So then when we got done with the first 2 weeks and we pumped out just a basic tower defense game, then the second shot that we had for another 2 week sprint, developing a full game, we were a lot more confident in our abilities. We knew each other a lot better, so we were able to gauge how long things would actually take for us. So I think part of scheduling how long something will take is through your own experience.
Yeah, absolutely.
So how do you, once you've given the schedule for yourself, I've said, all right, I think I'm going to get this done, it's going to take me X many hours, how do you keep yourself on that schedule? Like you're going through, you're 3 hours in, how do you know you're halfway done or not? Like, do you correct midpoint, or you just go until you're done and then correct later?
Oh goodness.
Oh, man. Well,
That's so dependent.
We haven't even talked about dependencies. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, it depends if George got done A, so that way I can complete
my schedule
B.
it's a very, vague point. If you knew that, you sell millions of dollars in a self-help book, right?
Yeah.
But like, what kind of steps would you normally take as a PM to help people keep on schedule?
So I think one of the big things, just like high level, is make sure you're holding those stand-up meetings every day. You may think, well, there's only 2 of us. We don't.
And we're talking about Scrum.
Fine, whatever.
Yeah, we're talking about Scrum.
You find that when you do go through the effort of actually holding those meetings, even if they're 5 to 10 minutes long, occasionally you'll hold those meetings and then someone will go, oh, you know what? I didn't think I had any blockers, but I actually do. And just keeping that form of communication going and getting in the habit, you'll also find that you're kind of working towards a goal every day. Like, oh, I want to have something to report on in stand-up tomorrow. I'm going to look like I didn't do anything. So I think it kind of keeps you on task too. Even as a project manager, I find that I keep a list going of what I did and what I need to do, because I want to make sure at stand-up I'm not sitting there, with my finger in my nose with no idea what I did yesterday.
What are those 3
or what I'm
questions,
doing.
Katie? What are those?
So at the stand-up, the questions you want to answer are, first of all, the way we do it, which I actually really like and would recommend, is first of all, you report, do I have any blockers? Next of all, I don't know. Second of all, reporting on whether you think your sprint is currently on track. And then lastly, you say, this is what I got done since last stand-up, and here's what I plan to do today.
It sounds like a pretty good priority, even if you're not doing a full-on Scrum, just having like that general meeting with whatever people you're working on, having this is what I've done since last time we've talked. That daily sounds good, but however long it takes. And
then usually, like during the Scrum, at least to my knowledge, I guess you can say the traditional role of the Scrum Masters, they're just there, like taking notes, making sure everybody's doing the meeting, everybody has their say and all that stuff. But as soon as there's a blocker and they hear about a blocker, then after the Scrum is done, and everybody can go about their business stuff, they'll go and talk to the people and be like, okay, what's impeding your progress? What is not allowing you to move forward? And then they'll deal with it outside of the meeting, because the whole point is just it's a quick little meeting. It's 5-10 minutes, maybe 15 minutes at most. And once it hits that time, the Scrum Master, basically says, okay, meeting adjourned, and then goes about their business of trying to make sure if there are blockers, what are they? How can we address them? And just takes care of it.
So besides putting out, fires, what is the day of a project manager like? I mean, is it just putting out fires? Like I said, is it just dealing with issues that come up?
I think it depends on where you're working and what your setup is.
Yeah.
It can be just putting out fires all day. I think when you're working in a company that has several projects going, you're checking in on several different sprints to make sure that people are reporting properly on, what stories are finished. Stories or features, interchangeable. Whether they're correctly kind of showing their progress within the project management tool you're using. As for myself, I also help out on making sure that all of our documentation is up to date, organizing that kind of thing. And it's a lot of facilitation, not just putting out fires, but making sure people are talking to each other. If somebody reports a blocker, but then they don't, resolve that blocker themselves, you want to make sure, follow up, that those people are talking to each other, and just kind of looking for holes. Where is there maybe somewhere that people might not have communicated or need to communicate? Or, is this project getting off track? Should we hold a meeting with the stake owners and reevaluate where we're at? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, because ultimately, project manager, producer, they're ultimately people engineers. They're dealing with people. Again, if there's a lack of communication, or if something's not getting documented correctly, making sure everything is neat and tidy, so that way other people aren't impeded by someone else. Just, I wouldn't say being lazy, but maybe they just forgot to update a file or something like that. So you're just making sure the whole ship is running.
So
right.
when do you need a project manager? Because I'm a small 3-person team. We might need project management. I've probably been bad and never really done formal project structures. It's a good thing that, more teams should be doing. But that's not necessarily they need a 4th person to do that full time on that team, right?
Yeah.
So you're asking, when do you need a full-time project manager?
When do you need to vote and say, you know what? For 4 to 8 hours of the day, we need somebody working on project management. How is it a matter of the size of the team? Is it size of the project? Is it complexity of the project? What's that threshold?
I would say, have you read a book called Rework by the guys that did, I think it was Basecamp?
No. I
Oh
haven't.
yeah, those guys.
That's a good one.
I think I have one.
Definitely check it out.
Rework, it's called?
Yeah,
Add that to my
pretty sure
reading
it's
list.
Rework. It's a good read, really fast read,
I
but
think it's
good.
37 Signals.
Yeah, 37
Yeah.
Signals, thanks. And
Plug. No.
no affiliations with them, but I just really like the book. But I think they kind of hit on this topic a little bit, and I was very much in agreement with what they were saying, even though I guess it kind of cost me the job. But, I would say keep small as long as you can. If you're indie and you don't have a big budget and you're trying to get off the ground, keep small. And when you bring on people to your project, bring on people who can self-project manage.
Yes.
As much as possible, because there are people out there who are really good about, reporting on what they're doing and keeping organized. Look for those people and hang on to them tightly, and avoid the project manager until you have the means to do so and bring one on.
That's kind of a good general point when hiring or finding team members in general. You want people who are not just single role specific. When you're working at a studio or a small company, they want people who can straddle the lines. They don't want people who only do one thing and won't touch anything else because that's not their job. And project management is a really good secondary skill because no matter what you're doing, you need it.
I might counter that and say it's a great secondary skill, but you might want to find a project manager who also has interest in other things. Like you might find a project manager who's also interested in ad ops or promoting, and you might be able to kind of have a brand manager who is also project managing for you. So you have someone who's managing your day-to-day, but then is working on trying to promote your company. And if you can find somebody with more of a dual role, then it might be great to have someone who's nearly full-time project manager, but also helping out in other areas.
Yeah, that's a great point.
In my mind, it's like, and something I would aspire to be would be like project manager / product manager, because it's like, having been able to know the schedules and the tasks and know where everything's going, and then at the same time, putting your product out there, learning how to put their product out there to the community, and also getting that community feedback to then share back with your developers and stuff, and then going back even to your schedule and be like, well, does this make sense? Should we, change A, B, or C, or is this a stretch goal, for us? If you actually find feedback that, makes sense, that there's something that really could make or break your game.
Yeah, and I found that so often. I was coming out of college a while back. I really expected that it was kind of. Actually, I would say I didn't even really know what I was getting into entirely. I was like, I want to be a producer. I'll start as associate producer, and I'll work my way up, and wherever that takes me. And what I've found is that oftentimes, in a job where I get hired as a producer, I also become a designer, almost always. That there's some level of design that needs to be done, or design feedback. Especially if you're working with like an external team, somebody overseas or somebody, just in another office somewhere, if you're trying to communicate your business's goals, oftentimes they're also design goals, so you end up giving a lot of design feedback. So I think any aspiring project managers out there or producers, definitely get your feet wet in design as well, because I think it's a really handy secondary trait to have.
Well, it makes sense because design is all about communication. It's communicating ideas. It's communicating, a project in your head and getting it into reality. So if you can do that well, you'll just be a better project manager because you can communicate your ideas more clearly.
Yeah, that's a great way to look at it.
A lot of overlap in that skill set right there.
Especially if you're dealing with a designer who may not really be able to fully express himself to other individuals.
Yeah, you can help facilitate.
So basically you can essentially help facilitate. It's like, okay, so you want to do this. So you mean this? Yes, no.
Yeah.
And then you can essentially, help him, create, he essentially by helping them, he, she, then it just makes it so much easier, especially when you're trying to construct a plan or figure out a schedule.
Right. It makes you a better facilitator, too, if you're communicating with developers and you're trying to be a liaison between the design and development, design and stakeholders, design and art. And I have an art background as well, which has been helpful. Any secondary skills you can pick up is going to make you a better communicator as a producer or project manager.
Definitely.
Yeah, because if you can understand how to talk to the engineers, the designers, and the artists, that's definition of the project manager right there. They have to.
Yeah, you are awesome.
Yeah.
Especially when you start dealing with certain types of people where it's like, hey, we want to put in this feature, and I'm like, do you realize what that's going to take? I don't think so, or else you would not have recommended such a thing.
Yeah, or you run into like artists are like, oh, I'll go through all of this extra work because I don't, that's how it has to be done, when they could have just talked to an engineer and he could have wrote a script that does that like for them and save them hours of work.
And then even the basic one, which is the communication between art and engineering. Art's like, we can do everything and we want to do everything. And engineering's like, oh my God, you have no clue. But we want to have a gigantic bowling ball that blows up as big as the sun with 20 million particle effects. And
like number one side of a bad producer is when they're just like being terrible to developers.
Try to be intermediary and facilitator.
So speaking of bad things happening, okay, I'm on a project, we're going good, and we miss deadlines. It happens. You kind of almost have to plan for it happening, but what do? I know in Scrum, you just kind of, keep it on the task list and anything else, but, if I'm in a waterfall development, do I have to reschedule everything? Does my entire project break down because I missed one deadline? I'll have a cascading effect?
Well, I would say it depends on what it is.
Gantt chart party.
Yeah. Yeah. It depends on what it is, but eventually it'll get to a point in time where, you might need to start cutting. You might have to figure out, okay, where do we want to go? Is it, what needs to be cut in order to make sure that we know, or that we will hit ultimately the deadline, which is ship date. And then obviously prior to that, depending on what you're doing, I guess in traditional, what was it, Katie? Like if you go gold, which is usually like a month if you're printing for a console.
Going gold is when you ship traditional.
I only worked as a tester in console. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. So, basically then there's these other, deadlines up ahead. So, because ultimately it's gold, it's code, it's, ready to go. And
anything after that is version 1.1.
Yeah. Anything after that is like, not happening.
Right.
But yeah, then you're balancing the quality.
Well, indies have the advantage that often they don't have a hard going gold deadline. Sometimes there's some deals on the table that they have to.
That is a deadly slippery slope.
Yes. It's like, I don't care what it is. We're making a shoe simulator. It's like, give yourself a deadline. What is ship date? And then from there, because without a ship date, without a hard goal or a hard deadline, then you could just easily just fiddle around forever in a day and never really get anything done. Or be like,
I think every developer
push it off another month.
Every indie developer has been guilty of that at some point. I've been incredibly guilty of that.
Yeah, but it's like, like first things first. Okay, I have a game. I have all my stuff. I know what I'm going to do. Great. When is it shipping?
So like,
Because I mean, even when you're creating your schedule, I mean, that's basically that's your start. When am I shipping? Now work backwards. Because how do I ultimately achieve that ship date?
Right.
yeah, you have to break down like every part of the project. And,
Yeah.
you
Which
put
again
a couple
goes back
hours
to-
extra work at the beginning, but that will pay off.
Because again, it goes back to what's bare bones. Okay, what's the next layer? All right, then now what's our stretch goals? Sweet. You know, after again figuring out how much time you think everything's going to take and stuff, if you can, you know, I mean, what I would like to do sometimes, you know, just in my own head, don't tell the team, is like, oh, you know, I put it like maybe a day buffer zone. You know, that way I know it's like, well, if it takes a little bit longer, I know I've sort of put a little bit of a buffer in there, but that might be the only one. And that would be like my alarm, like, crap. I might need to start
don't
thinking
you want
what
to
to cut on
plan
the back
for,
end.
you know, not even a day, but like a week or more just for play testing?
Um,
Like, isn't it good to have a very large buffer between this game is done and this game needs to ship?
I would say it. I don't know how Katie feels, but it's like you should be playing it. You know, I guess, you know, with indies and stuff, if you know, make it playable as soon as possible. Implement a feature. Does it work? Is it fun? Does it enhance or detract, you know, from the game? And I think that's one of the fun things when it comes to Scrum, is you can build it, implement it, play it, and see if it works or not. Because if it sucks, get it out. You know, but at the same time, you know, with your deadline, I mean, obviously you are serious in attacking, you know, and doing what you need to do to build a really fun game and stuff. But ultimately play it, because you'll find out within the first week, wow, that game design sucked. So we'll just, you know, take what we can, move on to the next project.
Well, what do you do, Katie? Like, what is your answer to that? How do you schedule in that time between finished and when it's due?
So I think that I've been in different places where they've done it in different ways, and I think that the way that Andrew's discussing it reminds me a lot of, especially waterfall places. But I think in that kind of scenario, especially when you're working with waterfall or when you're working with a very large project, you really want to look at alpha beta. Beta is supposed to be feature complete, and if you're feature complete, then you shouldn't be running into a lot of problems while you're, you know, becoming art complete, right?
Oh, yes.
So if that's the case, then you don't need to make a huge buffer because your technical stuff is hashed out.
Because if it wasn't done, then it's not in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of cheating the beta. Like,
It's
oh
like-
yeah, it's beta except for that little thing,
Yeah,
and that little thing, and
basically,
that thing
Terrible.
over there.
you build it. Alpha is a representation of the game. You know, at least hopefully it's running bare bones, and you have some representation of a feature, even if it's not working. But
Right.
by the time you get to beta, if it's not there or if it's broken or whatever, sorry, gotta go.
Yeah, and I would say, you know, there isn't an exact answer as to how much time you should pad. But most recently, you know, working with XAM, and now it's such tight, well, not, I shouldn't say tight project schedules, but, you know, working with Agile where you've got these 2-week project schedules, I found that it's become, and working so strictly with Scrum and Agile, I found that it's much more of a conversation. You know, I think at other companies sometimes, a lot of times you'll find that as a producer or project manager, you're kind of the schedule guru, and it's kind of your decision how long you think it can take, and then you bring that idea to other people and say, hey, do you think this is about right? And they say yes or no, but, you know, they're not constantly reporting to you like, hey, you know, this time isn't going to work. You know, a lot of times people are heads down working. But if you're in an agile scenario, you're meeting with people regularly and you're talking to them and you're planning sprints with the whole team. Everyone is sitting there. Everyone is deciding what their capacity is. And as a group, you all have a same page understanding of where you're at. So it's less of a responsibility for the project manager to pad in that scenario and more of being vigilant about seeing, okay, in the past, here's our capacity, here's how much we were able to complete. If we keep going at that speed, where would we be? And, you know, also from a sprint to sprint, you know, seeing, okay, suddenly we have 30 points in this sprint. Normally we have 12. Hey guys, let's take a look here. This is 30 points. This is a lot more than we normally do. Are we maybe missing something? Are we overestimating? And, you know, generating those kinds of conversations is a lot more important, I think, than necessarily padding.
Yeah, no, I would agree. That's like,
I mean, the idea is that you
optimal
don't
way
need
to do
pad
it.
if you scheduled well, right?
yeah, if you scheduled one, and again, yeah, you can't beat, you know, talk to your developers, talk
Yeah.
to art, find out, don't just be like,
to people is a good
pretty
summary
friendly.
of project management, right? You have to be able to talk about design, you have to be able to talk about the project, you have to be able to talk about what your goals are, how long it's going to take you. It's talking position.
yeah, don't
Yeah.
be the guy or girl in the office closed door. It's like, yeah, they should be able to do it in 2 days. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, you want a framework, huh?
So both of you guys went to college wanting to do project management. Both of you guys now have jobs dealing with people, managing people, trying to figure out stuff and get things to happen. What's the one advice you can think of, like Andrew mentioned this earlier, what did you wish you knew coming out of college that you didn't learn until after you worked in the industry? Andrew, why don't you start? Like what one thing did you want to tell yourself a few years ago as you graduated?
Oh, wow.
I have one if you want me to start.
Yeah, go for it.
And it's still advice I would give myself now, and it's something I've been looking into, is take just a basic class in coding. If you're coming from an art background, it would be so helpful if you could communicate with the same terms that developers are using. Otherwise, it's a really tough ramp up to come straight out of college. And if you have an art background or just straight up project management background, and you hear all these words that you have no idea what they mean. And when somebody's giving you an estimate, especially if you're new you're fresh out of college and you're just this associate producer, if people are giving you estimates that are off, they know you don't know that they're being baloney, and they may be you don't have a good sense of when somebody is maybe not good at estimating their own time or maybe trying to pull one over on you. So I think getting that education, just taking a class while you're still in college to really get that information so you don't have to go back and take a class on it, would be really awesome. And I think it makes you a better communicator.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think I would recommend a project manager take at least one class in all disciplines. You should have a basic understanding of audio, programming, design, at least one class worth.
Yeah, because I'm in the same boat as Katie where, I came in wanting to do game design, learned a little about that, then switched to level design, so know a little bit about that, and then ultimately, went into just managing everybody because that seemed to be what I was doing all the time. So it's like, oh, that's a producer. Oh, okay, cool. And I was fortunate enough to have a really good friend on one of our projects who was an engineer. And yeah, he basically Katie validated exactly what he said. He's like, yeah, a lot of engineers won't do what I just did, which he went through and he's like, okay, you want to do this, here's an honest to God, realistic expectation for how long this project's going to take, and it was like 250 hours of engineering to build the framework.
Yeah, if you don't have the engineering experience, how can you possibly schedule that?
Right.
And that's exactly what he said. He said people will be like, they'll tell you it'll take a week and it sounds fantastic, and it's like, yeah, that should take a week, and he's just like, yeah, and it might take 2 hours. Like, 200 lines of code, what is that to some people? It's like nothing.
There's a really fun game you can play with programmers next time you're talking with one to see how good they are at scheduling themselves. Just give them like, oh, hey, how long do you think it would take you to implement something that they vaguely understand it's complicated, right? That they don't necessarily know a lot about what to do. They'll say, about 2 weeks. And then you call them on it and you say, actually, you have no idea how to do that, huh? You just said 2 weeks. Because any programmer, if they don't know necessarily how long something's going to take, they say it'll take about 2 weeks. And it's not that they are lying or they're like, oh, I don't know how to do that, I'll say 2 weeks. But they genuinely think to themselves and they say, well, I know, some structure of that. I've kind of heard about that. I'll look up the rest. It'll take me 2 weeks. It's a very common estimate. If you look at programming breakdowns of stuff it's 2 weeks cycles. Yeah. As soon as I learned that trick, I started looking at my own estimates and how long I would estimate doing stuff. And I started realizing most things I would estimate, I'm going to take 2 weeks to do that. And I'm like, oh, man, I'm really bad at estimating.
I mean, I was pretty lucky that I enjoyed, doing the HTML5 or HTML and CSS. And so, I mean, one of the components of what I do is we have a website. It's continually updating and all that stuff. So coming out of the gate, yeah, I had a coworker and they're like, oh, yeah, it'll take me a couple days. I'm like, dude, it should take you an hour Like, let me show you. But I mean, now, we're dealing with a whole bunch of other technologies when it comes to, are we doing SQL or no SQL, or just Node.js, Angular, JSON, jQuery. I'm just like, oh my goodness.
It's impossible to keep track of all the tech you'd be
there's
using.
so many techs with at least with what I'm doing now. There's so many different technologies that we could be implementing or not implementing, or we shouldn't implement. And ultimately, I give it up to our web designer and boss who know and understand that technology. But I owe it to myself. If you're dealing with a certain technology, or you just have a base understanding. What is JSON? What does it do? What is it responsible for? And just
insert tech here.
Insert tech here. It's like, just ask yourself those, some basic questions for it. Just at least have a base understanding. So, as Katie said, you can talk to the developer in their terms.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you guys very much. After the main show, I like to always ask what games you've been playing lately.
Everything.
It's all about, making games is fun, but we need to know what we're playing. For me, we had just taken a long break over the holidays, so I got to get through a bunch of games. My favorite of which was Gone Home. I finally started playing that and going through it, and it is so beautiful. Like, the attention to detail in that game is amazing. Like, the washing machine opens and closes. There's toothpaste tubes in every room of the house. I don't want to spoil the game, but in general, it's you're walking around an empty house. It's not like a horror game. It's not jump out and scare you. It's not, where there's spooky noises or whatever. It's just there's a house, there's notes, there's voicemail messages, there's pictures on the wall, and you read stuff and look around, and by your sheer curiosity of wanting to know what's going on, you kind of learn about this story of this family and who's in the house and why they're not there right now and what might be going on.
Yeah. I mean, that was one of the games that I've been able to play recently also. And it's like you have all your AAA titles, shooters, whatever, right? But I'm really enjoying all the, what would be considered artsy fartsy games. But for me, I love those things. And I love a good story overall. And then Gone Home for me was really an enjoyable experience. And at the same time, my level design background came in, so I'm sort of scrutinizing it at the same time with the pathing, like, oh, okay, all right. But ultimately, I mean, that was a real treat. And I love those games. And I also like, obviously, Steam sales going on, so I picked up Mirror MP or EP. And I picked up a couple of other like really indie art titles that just, fun. Like, I mean, even picking up Super Hexagon, having fun with that.
There was some games on sale for like 50 cents.
Proteus. I picked up that too.
Oh, okay.
It's like, Mirror Moon EP. That was the one. I mean, I have all my other AAA ones too, but Gunpoint. Mm-hmm. If you haven't been able to play Gunpoint, I was following that since I found a little blog for it, and
I haven't heard of it. What's it?
Gunpoint. It was actually made in Game Maker of all things.
Oh, nice.
Which is really cool. I think he worked for one of the major publishing, like maybe IGN UK or something like that. Yeah. And so he's just making this on the side, right? And
what kind of game is it?
It's a side scroller puzzle. And I just go check it out. It's sort of hard to really put in words. I mean, it's simplistic in nature, but it's just a lot of fun. And it has this fun thing that you can, once you get up to the level, you can start switching doors around and stuff as you're trying to get through the environment. Mm-hmm. And there's baddies in there and stuff, and you can flip a light switch, right? But you've hooked the wiring up to where it opens a door, and then there's a bad guy that happens to be in front of said door and then gets slammed in the face. So
interesting. I'll definitely have to check it out. That sounds fun.
Cool.
What about you, Katie? What have you been playing lately?
Well, I destroyed Link Between Worlds in like a week and absolutely loved it.
I've heard so many good things.
That.
Like, if people are really into the old style Zeldas, that's the one to get into.
Yeah, my favorite Zelda was Ocarina of Time, and like Link to the Past is a great game, but it's not something I've really ever yearned to go back and play. But playing this, I was just like, wow, I miss games like this, where the controls are relatively simple, but the puzzles are very complicated. So you don't have to remember all these combos and, different ways to hit A, B, up and down, left and right in order to do something. And it's more about kind of understanding your environment and how it works and solving puzzles that way, or, all the different tools you have in your possession, how do you use them? And that was really awesome. So I highly recommend that. And then I also just finished The Room, because The Room 2 just came out. So I finished The Room so I could play The Room 2.
I think, right?
Yeah, it was free. I don't know if it still is, but it was.
Yeah, it might have been for a limited time.
Yeah, but it was. I would have paid for it. Now that I've beat it, I was like, oh wow, that would have been worth the money. Dang it.
Too, right?
Yes, The Room only $4.99 on iTunes. Room 2, that is, and then The Wolf Among Us.
I haven't played through that, but I love the Telltale games so much.
Yeah, this was great. I got really hooked on it, and I really enjoyed it. I've read the comics, but I don't think that that's a necessity. I'm not a huge fan of the comics, actually, but I really enjoyed the game.
I think I'm going to do the whole waiting thing and wait for the whole series to be complete, and then I'll pick it up like I did.
No!
What episode are you on now?
Because it annoys me so much, because I want to keep playing. It's like, for me, it's frustrating. So that's why it's like, I want the complete thing, and at the same time, it's hurting me to see it on sale. I'm like, oh, I want to play.
No, get it on sale now. You know you're going to want it later, right?
I know.
It's not going to be cheaper later.
Well, no, it's not. I just want the complete.
Yeah.
That's it. Because
we do what I do. I just have a bunch of games in my Steam library that are just not played.
Because I picked up.
Oh, yeah, I do that.
Like, I got Gone Home, months ago.
Dude,
many months ago, and I just now played it.
Yeah, you guys have sold me on Gone Home.
Yeah, Gone Home. I still
no,
played,
absolutely, you should get Gone Home.
I got Frozen Synapse, and I still want to play that. Gunpoint I played immediately. I finally got Proteus. I mean, that's
it's
just
good.
fun.
It's good to collect games, and it's good to support developers, and especially
then I got the Stanley
Steam
Parable.
sales are kind of amazing for indies, right? You can get stuff really cheap.
Oh yeah. Oh, and then the other. Just go to the green light section and see what other fun is in there, and I don't know. There's a lot, and then at the same time, there's a bunch of stuff you can find even out there. Like Arcane Kids made this Bubsy 3D. It is trippy as all heck.
Bubsy.
Yeah. Did you see that? It's like Bubsy 3D.
I played the original.
Well, the thing
they
is,
did a remake in Unity.
Yes. No, it's Bubsy 3D. Bubsy visits the James Turrell retrospective in L.A. Okay, just play it. It's a freaking trip. And then you can go back to the Arcane Kids backlog, because they made some other really, really trippy game that's like a skate park in the future in LA at the same time, so it's like Tony Hawk, but at the same time they gave you the controls of tribes. So you have to know how to do the surfing technique in order to get around.
Very cool. Wow, that's lots of good recommendations right there. I got to get a bunch more games now. I just got through a bit of a backlog, and now I have to add more to it.
And then I have to send you the other one, which was made by. If we're talking about schedules and Scrum and all this stuff, this is an amazing feat. I think it's called 12 or the 13, but pretty much it started with there are 12 of the top name indie developers out there, and the first portion of the game started with the person who made VVV. Right, he did but the thing is, he only had 48 hours to complete that first section, and then from there, the next indie.
It's like one of those novels that are written by 12 different authors.
Yes. So he started off, and then it's the next developer got it in hand. He only had 48 hours to do the next section, and so on and so forth. And that game, the ones I gave it to, people were freaked out because it looked like you downloaded it from a GeoCities site. They're like, what the heck is this? Did you give me a virus? And then they got in there, and it's another trip because it's just trippy.
Wow, that one's probably one I'll check out tonight, actually.
I should be able to send that to you.
Sweet. All right.
And to Katie, too. Yeah.
Well, if you want to find more about me on the web, you can go to tobiahmarks.com. That's my blog. I have a bunch of resources for developers, blog posts, stuff. You can contact me there, or go at Tobiah Marks on Twitter. Where can we find more about you, Andrew?
You can find me at drusive.com. That's where I have my portfolio site right now. I'm going through the process of updating and trying to add more content to that, if not actually building a whole new site for myself with the new knowledge that I know.
Sweet. What about you, Katie? Where can we find more about you?
I don't actually have any cool Twitter or public representation right now of me, so I should probably get on that.
You got like a LinkedIn profile you got to put?
I have a LinkedIn profile, yeah.
There you go. That works.
Let's see. Maybe
to find her on LinkedIn and send her email.
Yeah, find me on LinkedIn. My name is Katie Welka.
I mean, we can have a link, when the pod is casted.
Well, if you want to find more about the podcast in general, you can go to beindynow.com. This is a website you can find more episodes, back episodes, show notes, stuff like that. If you want to get those links or check other stuff out. You can email the show at beindynow.com. Let us know suggestions of topics you want to hear. If you want to have a suggestion of a guest or you want to be a guest, let me know. And thank you very much for listening, and go out there and make some games.
Yes, do it. Get to the chopper.